How obsolete is our military becoming every day compared to what the Chinese are spending on?
This is not an on and off switch. It's not a simple bipolar moment. In other words, the choices are not let's just continue to build huge legacy platforms, or let's stop building those completely and just go after the new, if you will, high-tech things China's doing. Think of it as a rheostat, like the dimmer in your dining room. And right now, you are correct. I would say in really broad strokes, 75 to 80% of the R&D procurement is still going to legacy systems, big land armies, tanks, aircraft carriers. And there are scenarios in which those have real facility. But we better start moving that rheostat. We better start moving that dial toward the higher end technologies we spoke about a moment ago, because I assure you, China has already done so. See paragraph 1 where we started this conversation about a streamlined system. They get to make decisions and move out in ways that we are retarded from doing by the messiness, as wonderful as it is, of our democratic system.
Now, if it's 75 or 80 total spending, the world's largest defense budget by far in the United States on legacy systems, if you could snap your fingers, if you were China and you say, here's what America should be doing, what percentage should that be today?
Let me clarify one point. It's an important one. 75 to 80% of the budget, the $700 billion, as you well know, goes to personnel. And they're very expensive because we have an all-volunteer force. So sometimes when people want to compare U.S. budget, $700 billion, to China's budget, probably $300 billion, don't forget, they don't pay those huge personnel costs.
And their labor costs are rather low compared to those of the U.S., yes.
Precisely my point. So it really is kind of apples to apples here. And to answer your question, of that disposable part of our budget, 75 to 80% of R&D and procurement, the things we buy, the stuff, the military kit, that's still going to legacy systems. I think I would throw that dial to 50-50 like today. And I think over time, you're going to want to move it toward 70% on these advanced and emerging systems, Ian.
We talked about the fact that the United States government is messy and not streamlined / authoritarian. But beyond that, some of the greatest advances in all of these new technologies is the private sector. I mean, if the United States were truly to address this in the next 15 years, what does that mean for the role of the most important tech companies in the United States?
You think of an iceberg. The government is the little tip of the iceberg up there. The mass of the iceberg, the capability of America, is down there in the private sector. So we're going to have to kind of incentivize. We're going to have to kind of cajole. We need thought leaders from both sides. It'll be an effort to do this. What will help crystallize this, I think, in the minds of Americans over time is watching China and watching what they're doing on the international scene, from cracking down on Hong Kong to imprisoning Uyghurs to pressurizing Taiwan to, in the high Himalayas, going after borders and boundaries of India, pressuring our allies like Australia on trade relations. The list goes on and on. It's a looming tower. We better wake up.
Now, to go back to what that means for the tech companies, so, I mean, does that mean for you that a company like Apple, which is presently making a big piece of the iPhone in mainland China, Tesla, which is doing a lot of its advanced electric battery development with a Chinese company, does that mean that those models are just not going to work in a decade's time?
I don't know, and I don't think anybody does. But I will tell you this. We need a very hard, fast look at what are the critical supply chains, where are they located, which ones absolutely must be onshored or at least redundancy created. And by the way, you mentioned tech appropriately. I'd say medical supplies, biotech is another area that would benefit from some scrutiny. But you and I have had this conversation. I think it would be a mistake to simply break relations with China and walk away and create, in effect, a bipolar world. That's not what we need. The way I think of it, Ian, is we kind of need to bend the relationship with China on some of the topics I mentioned a moment ago, including their claim of ownership of the South China Sea. We're going to have to bend it, but we want to avoid breaking it all together, because down that path doth a war lie.